Have you ever felt that something essential about life and about death has always been hidden from us? Imagine for a moment there's knowledge so profound, so transformative, it could forever change your relationship with the fear of the end. Today, for the first time, I'm going to share with you unreleased, almost forbidden, parts of a secret interview with Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, a man who, even decades after his death, continues to be a subject of debate and inspiration among scholars worldwide. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to access more stories like this. Behind locked doors, away from the eyes of the press and the scientific community, Cayce reportedly revealed, in disconcerting detail, what truly happens when our eyes close to this life and open to another reality. Material so powerful, so extraordinary, it was suppressed for years, guarded by a few as a dangerous treasure. What you're about to hear isn't just a narrative. It's an invitation, a portal, a key to open inner doors to face one of humanity's greatest taboos, our passing. But before we continue, I need to ask you a special favor. If this topic resonates with you, if you feel this kind of content can transform your view of the world, like the video now, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell. Comment soon with your biggest question about life after death. This helps this content reach more people who, just like you, are looking for something beyond the obvious. And now, take a deep breath. Surrender to the experience, because what comes next might forever change the way you face the inevitable. Imagine yourself sitting before Cayce, in a dimly lit room, the smell of old books, stopped clocks, the silence heavy with the weight of a secret waiting to be revealed. Cayce, with his eyes closed, sinks into a deep trance. His words begin to echo, not just in that room, but in the most intimate questions of each of us. Are you ready? Because the veil is about to be lifted. Since the beginning of time, death has been our greatest mystery. Religious figures, philosophers, scientists, everyone tries to decipher what happens when our body stops. Is it an absolute end, an abyss, an endless night? Or as Cayce revealed in his never-before-published interview, are we just changing clothes? Moving rooms in a house with infinite chambers? Cayce, in that environment of reverent silence, begins to narrate what he saw, and his words are unlike anything we've ever heard. Consciousness, he says, doesn't extinguish. It merely changes channels, like someone turning the dial of an old radio, tuning into another frequency of existence. It's not the end, but a passage. It's not denial, but transformation. Imagine for a moment, your memories, your affection, what makes you you. All of it passing through the walls of the body and continuing an infinite journey. This idea challenges everything we've learned, everything we fear. Cayce talks about the moment after death, that frontier that paralyzes us with fear. Instead of pain, there's a gentle sense of relief, like someone releasing a heavy weight carried for many years. Fear, he says, is a human construct. The soul, your true essence, feels only curiosity, wonder, freedom. Death, Cayce says, isn't darkness, it's an awakening to a greater reality. Pause. Reflect. How many of us live prisoners of the fear of death? How many of our grandparents, close friends, carry that dread in their eyes, in whispered conversations before sleep? What if, in reality, we were facing one of humanity's greatest deceptions? What if behind the veil there was only continuity, an invitation to discovery? That's where Cayce drops the real hook. You don't fear the end, you fear the unknown, but everything you now recognize as life continues with you. Only the landscape around you changes. Imagine, there's no rupture, no brutal cut. There's continuity. And in that moment, a small thread of hope begins to unravel within your chest. Have you ever wondered, where does that feeling of déjà vu come from? That hunch that there's something more? What if it's your soul recognizing, through a crack in a door, a life beyond what your eyes can see? Now perhaps you're thinking, but how can I trust a single voice, a single experience? The mystery of death fascinates and disturbs not only us but different peoples and cultures throughout centuries. Spiritual giants from various traditions have touched on this topic. Think of names like Satya Sai Baba, Yogananda, Ramana Maharshi. Each, in their own way, describes the persistence of consciousness in the realms beyond matter. But what makes Cayce a unique figure? His clarity. While many mystics speak in parables, Cayce brings concrete details. In the secret interview, he doesn't just narrate vague images, but describes stages, sensations, encounters, and internal changes that every human being will experience when crossing the frontier. He goes beyond the diffuse promises of heaven and white light. He talks about life review, about reunions, about the tactile and emotional sensation of this phenomenal transition. And here, psychology meets mystery. Modern studies of near-death experiences, accounts from people who have been on the brink of the end, reinforce what Cayce described. Consciousness doesn't extinguish, but expands. People report floating above their bodies, conversing with deceased loved ones, reviewing their entire life's journey in moments of profound clarity and compassion. There's a convergence, an echo that crosses cultures, eras, religions. Have you noticed how different traditions tell similar stories about what's on the other side? Why do distant cultures share symbols of passage, of light, of reunion? Are we all looking at the same ocean, each from a different beach? Cayce believed so, and more. He stated that every sincere seeker would, sooner or later, have their own glimpse of these realities. Imagine the power of this. It's not about blind belief, but about experiencing, recognizing within yourself traces of this mystery. The invitation from Cayce, from Baba, from the wise, is for you to observe, question, dive deep into your own consciousness. Because perhaps the great answer lies less in their words and more in the silence of your nights, in the dreams you've already had, in the intuitions that went unnoticed. Have you ever had a dream so real, so vivid, that it seemed more true than wakefulness? Have you felt the presence of a loved one after they passed? Let that echo. Now close your eyes for a moment and imagine the moment your last breath fades. What happens according to Cayce? There's no judgment, no trumpet blasts, no threatening shadows. What he described was a surprisingly natural phenomenon. A feeling of lightness, of gentle detachment, like releasing a balloon, first the string, then the air, until you realize you're floating. The first thing Cayce reports is the total absence of pain. Physical death, he says, is often gentler than a deep sleep. The body rests, but consciousness, that attentive spark, slips out with curiosity and surprise. Contrary to what movies and tragic stories teach us, there's no struggle, no despair, just a gentle dissolution of boundaries. You look at your body and understand, with unprecedented clarity, that it was just a garment. Your essence is alive, awake, more lucid than ever. Here Cayce touches a deep wound, the fear of pain, suffering, oblivion. How many elderly people, how many frail people, live distressed imagining a cruel end, a lonely and painful journey? But his account is different. He speaks of an assisted journey, colored by feelings of acceptance, by a sudden perception of belonging. As if, after a long journey, you finally found your way home. At this moment, something extraordinary happens, a feeling of recognition. You are not lost, says Cayce. You wake up as if from a dream. Around you, forms of light, familiar presences, environments that seem made of memories. We are not helpless. We are not alone. The crossing, for him, is always welcoming, even for those who live their lives full of doubts or fears. Cayce emphasizes the way we die echoes our inner state, our predominant feelings. Those who cross with serenity find serenity. Those who cross with fear are gently welcomed until the fear dissipates. No one is forced, he says. The awakening is individual, compassionate, adjusted to the needs of each soul. And here I pause. What difference would it make to know with certainty that the passage is lighter than fear tells us? That there is welcome, there is light, there is recognition. Think of your loved ones, the elderly in your family. How liberating it would be to help these people exchange dread for curiosity, anguish for hope. Cayce concludes this part of the interview with an invitation. When contemplating your own mortality, don't close yourself off in darkness. Allow yourself to dream of reunion, of lightness, of the immortality of consciousness. Because that is what awaits us on the other side, life in even more beautiful forms. And before we move on, I want to ask you, share in the comments if you've ever had an experience, a dream, an inexplicable feeling of encountering someone from the other side. Let's strengthen this community of seekers, exchanging stories, doubts, and hope. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do it now so you don't miss the next chapters of this revelation. Get ready, because in the next topics, Cayce will expose what lies beyond this first crossing. What are heaven and hell really? How to prepare for the passage? what awaits us in terms of evolution and reunion. The journey is just beginning. When we think of heaven and hell, how many images come to mind? Golden gates, clouds, flames, eternal judgments. Since childhood, we've absorbed these representations as if they were definitive maps of what awaits us. But what if all of this is just the surface of a much deeper mystery? In the secret interview, Cayce gets straight to the point. Heaven and hell are not places, but states of consciousness. They are landscapes shaped not by an external judge, but by what we cultivate within ourselves. Imagine the power of that statement. All the visual, punitive, or rewarding apparatus of religions dissolves before the clarity of the insight. There is no divine court waiting with a list of sins and virtues. There is, however, the reaping of what we sow in life, in our emotions, thoughts, intentions. Have you ever noticed how the internal environment can be much more overwhelming than any external scenery? How remorse, anger, or guilt can turn a sunny day into a desert of pain, while gratitude, forgiveness, and love can transform even the most difficult moment into a source of peace. Cayce explains that, after death, it's no different. The energy, the vibration we nurture the most, is what immediately manifests when we cross the veil. And here, a revelation that challenges centuries of fear. There are no eternal condemnations, no arbitrary blessings. There are frequencies. Each consciousness, upon making the crossing, immediately tunes into the vibrational band that most corresponds to what it built throughout life. For those who cultivated resentment, attachment, cruelty, the world around them takes on contours of density and anguish. For those who practice detachment, empathy, compassion, the scenery is one of fullness and infinite possibilities. Think about that. How many times have you wished for a second chance, a new beginning, right after a mistake? The afterlife for Cayce is no different from a great laboratory of consciousness. There is no irremediable punishment, but rather the possibility of learning, adjusting, seeking higher tunings. Heaven and hell, then, become merely temporary stations, scenarios for the eternal learning of the spirit. Modern psychology, in turn, has already mapped the power of beliefs over reality. People who live believing in inevitable punishment tend to create cycles of self-punishment. Those who believe in the possibility of learning and evolving, however, build new realities every day. Cayce thus unites spirituality and science. You create your experience, not only in this life, but also afterward. Reflect, what kind of world are you building now, with your thoughts and feelings? What landscape do you expect to find when the crossing happens? By exchanging fear for responsibility, panic for protagonism, you assume the role of conscious creator of your destiny. Isn't that liberating? And perhaps upon realizing this, you begin to wonder, if everything is in my hands, what can I start changing today to find a heaven within myself? We now enter one of the most touching passages of the interview. Cayce talks about the art of preparation, not as resignation, but as an act of courage and elevated consciousness. Accepting mortality is like preparing the soil before planting. Those who accept, detach, and contemplate reap a peaceful passage. Those who resist, fight with ghosts, reap tensions. Here, a radical invitation to honesty is worthwhile. How many times have you avoided thinking about your own finitude? How many times have you covered your ears at the word death, as if delaying the conversation could delay the event? Cayce states, the secret to a serene passage is not to deny, but to face it with curiosity and humility. Imagine, by accepting mortality, you allow everything in your life to gain new meaning. The embrace becomes deeper, forgiveness becomes urgent, attachment loses its meaning. People who contemplate life as finite, paradoxically, live more intensely. The elderly, who often feel invisible, are invited to participate in the most sacred transition that exists, not as victims, but as guides, living examples of the courage to look the mystery straight in the eye. At this moment, Cayce recommends practices that go beyond religious ritual, meditation, contemplation of nature's cycle, frank conversations with loved ones, writing about dreams, memories, and unfulfilled desires. He also talks about releasing fear, the conscious act of revisiting old grudges and forgiving oneself and others, preparing the heart's ground for the great flight. It's moving to realize that accepting death is not surrendering to the end, but to the beginning of a new stage. It's trusting that the river of consciousness keeps flowing, even when we don't see the riverbed. Cayce whispers, death is a birth Birth hurts, but it also enchants. Don't be afraid to say goodbye, because every goodbye is also a reunion. Psychology corroborates. People who talk openly about death tend to feel less anxiety, less depression, more sense of control and belonging to life. Accepting is not giving up. It's taking the reins of your own story. It's setting an example for the younger generation that everything, even the end, can be traversed with dignity and consciousness. At this point, do a quick exercise. Close your eyes now and imagine you've already accepted your passing. What would change in your life? What would you say to those you love? What loose ends would you finally resolve? Notice how everything becomes lighter, like a weight dissolving. For you, elderly viewer, know this. You are not alone. Everything you feel is legitimate. Your courage, your wisdom are beacons for all who come after. Share in the comments if you have experienced a transformative moment of acceptance. You can be a light for those who still fear, looking at their own finitude. Perhaps the greatest fear when thinking about death is, will I be alone? Will I lose those I love forever? Will I be adrift? Cayce answers, never. No one crosses this bridge alone. Love is the guiding thread of the journey. He describes in detail what he calls spiritual welcome committees, a loving, almost poetic network of friendly souls waiting to receive those who depart. Visualize the scene. You cross the frontier, still with traces of doubt, and you find familiar faces, beloved presences, benevolent entities that vibrate in tune with your story. There's no fear, only surprise and a deep feeling of belonging. It sounds like a dream, but Cayce affirms, every soul recognizes old ties as soon as it crosses the threshold. Reunion is not a possibility. It is the very nature of the post-life experience. And what about those who have lost children, partners, friends? According to Cayce, reunion is inevitable. There is no definitive separation. Death is just a pause in togetherness, a hiatus in direct communication, but it is not a rupture of affection. Love, like energy, is never lost. It just changes form. No prayer, no loving thought fails to echo on the other side. We are eternal in each other. Group psychology already points out, those who feel they belong to something greater, even if invisible, fear death less. Cultivating a sense of belonging, of the great family of life, is an antidote to existential loneliness. And Cayce takes this to its peak, showing that after death, belonging expands into the dimensions we cannot yet name. Imagine, at this instant, how many times you have missed someone who has passed on. How many times in dreams or moments of silence have you felt observed, protected, or supported by someone special? Cayce says that these intuitions are not illusions, they are glimpses, small signs that love does not cease in death. For the elderly especially, this is a balm, knowing they will not be forgotten, that they will meet those they loved, that they will continue to be a source of affection and learning, is the most effective remedy against fear and loneliness. The bond continues, the group expands, no one is alone. Therefore, Cayce concludes this part of the interview with an invitation. Speak now with those you love. Send letters, messages, say what you feel, both to the living and to those who have passed. Love builds bridges that no time, no space, no death can destroy. And you, have you ever felt this welcome? Share your story below. Together, let's strengthen this current, support those who are experiencing loss, and show that love truly is indestructible. Get ready, because in the next chapter of this journey, Cayce will reveal how the life review happens, and how self-compassion is the key to a full passage of learning and liberation. If you're feeling the impact of this message, like the video, subscribe and share with those who need to hear a word of peace and hope. Your action can be part of someone's welcome committee, even here, still in life. And so we continue, exploring the greatest mystery of all, that of consciousness and of love that never dies. Imagine yourself crossing the invisible boundary between the physical world and the world of spirit. Instead of a judgment court, you find a vivid screen where every gesture, every word, every choice of your life unfolds before your eyes, but not in a punitive way, but for understanding. Edgar Cayce describes this moment as the soul's replay, a life review in detail, not to condemn you, but for you to feel, understand, and grow. Think, how would you feel reliving every moment, every glance, every word said or unsaid? What if you experienced not only what you did, but the effect your actions had on other people? Cayce explains that in this process there's a deep dive into empathy. You feel the good you caused as a wave of warmth, and the suffering you provoked as a silent invitation to forgiveness and compassion. But contrary to tradition, there is no external judge. There is no condemnation from outside. Everything is internal sense, self-awareness. Cayce insists the life review is guided by love and the search for learning. Mistakes are not a cause for shame, but windows for evolution. This approach revolutionizes how we face our own successes and failures. There is no hell, only the chance to understand, reconcile, and forgive. Here, self-compassion becomes key. How many of us carry old guilt, silent regrets? Cayce teaches that the purpose of this review is not punishment, but liberation. It's looking at yourself with the tenderness we would wish from a friend. The process doesn't seek to crystallize the pain of the past, but to transform it into learning and an impulse to ascend. Reflect now. If you could review your life now, what would you like to mend? What choices would you make differently? What would you ask forgiveness for or give thanks for? The life review requires courage, but also the greatest kindness, being generous with yourself. By learning to forgive yourself, the soul finds lightness and can continue its journey unburdened. Numerous accounts of near-death experiences support this view. People report that, when reviewing their lives, they feel compassion for themselves and a deep desire to change. They return transformed, more open to forgiveness, less concerned with punishment, more focused on spiritual growth and the good they can do in their remaining time here. And you? Have you ever imagined living in a way that, in this final review, your choices would be a source of pride and not regret? Share in the comments what moment in your life you would like to heal or revisit. Your story can help others find the courage for their own reconciliations. The journey doesn't end with the life review. According to Cayce, the soul awakens in gradually more subtle realities, planes, dimensions, levels of consciousness where every detail reflects our vibrational state. Just as a student progresses to more complex rooms, the soul begins to experience planes that correspond to its degree of understanding and detachment, Cayce reveals. What does this mean? Imagine existence as a school, where death merely marks the change of rooms, not the final graduation. In these higher planes, what limits us is no longer time or matter, but only the rigidity of beliefs and the intensity of our feelings. Heaven and hell become temporary mental landscapes, not final destinations, but stages of learning. Cayce connects this to quantum physics. Just as particles can exist in multiple states at the same time, the soul learns to navigate multiple levels of reality, simultaneously experiencing past, present, and future. Time on the other side doesn't follow the same rules. Experiences can be revisited, choices can be understood in new lights. The concept of linear time dissolves, only the eternal now remains, an open field of possibilities. In this context, spiritual evolution ceases to be a race to please an external God and becomes a natural movement of expansion and integration. The learning cycle doesn't end, not even with the so-called death. On the contrary, with each passage, each review, each choice of love or fear, we ascend or descend on the spiral of consciousness, always invited to new challenges and discoveries. Have you ever felt, in meditation or dreams, being in places, situations, or times that don't fit into this life? Cayce says these are glimpses of these other frequencies, flashes of our true multidimensional nature. Some may revisit past lives, others connect with future possibilities, all experience sensations of eternity. And for Cayce, the central point is this: the soul is free. Even in the afterlife, there is no stagnation. Those who wish to grow will have new opportunities. Those who want to rest can do so. Each dimension is a scenario for self-knowledge, for reunions, for continuing to learn, always driven by the loving impulse to evolve. Pause for reflection. If you could access the future now, ask your wisest self from another dimension, what would you like to know? What advice would you give yourself at this very moment? Share your intuition in the comments. Now that you've journeyed with me through the backstage of existence, perhaps you're asking yourself, what do I do with all this? How do I prepare for a conscious and peaceful passing, as Cayce recommends? The answer begins with detachment. Cayce teaches that life is a flow, and the more we cling to people, possessions, status, or even rigid ideas, the harder the crossing becomes. Detaching isn't abandoning, but trusting that everything true remains. What is temporary dissolves. Practice detachment daily. Give thanks, forgive, let go of what no longer serves you. Forgiveness is another pillar. Not just forgiving others, but forgiving yourself. Release grudges, cleanse your soul. Forgiveness is the bridge that takes us from fear to love, from attachment to flow. Make the words "I forgive you" and "I forgive myself" liberating mantras. Contemplation is also fundamental. Set aside time to be silent, meditate, write about your feelings, observe your dreams. Cayce said that the world of sleep and dreams is an antechamber to life beyond death. Often, recurring dreams of reunions, revisiting the past, even flying, signal that the soul is already preparing for the transition. Also, pay attention to the signs. Spontaneous life reviews, intense memories, feelings of lightness, or even deep desires for reconciliation often appear as indications of spiritual maturation. Don't ignore these calls. They are invitations to begin making peace with your own story. And above all, Cayce encourages, share experiences. Talk about your dreams, your doubts, your fears. When we share, we ease the path for others and create a current of solidarity that transcends even death. The channel is open for all voices. Write in the comments your experience, your main lesson from this video, or a question you carry about the afterlife. Like, share this video, and subscribe, so together we can continue this journey of self-knowledge, courage, and reconnection with the divine. Who knows, by sharing your story, you might already be part of the welcome committee for others, helping to dispel fear and open doors to a much more conscious life and passing. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to access more stories like this, because in the end, as Cayce tenderly whispered, death doesn't confine you, it merely reveals you. And that's how we conclude this journey through mysteries and revelations, affirming our commitment to never stop asking, feeling, and connecting with what is most true, within us and beyond us.